I still remember the night it all fell apart, not because of a heated argument or some dramatic revelation, but because of a gift. It was a Wednesday evening, one of those quiet, unremarkable nights when life feels like it's just moving forward as usual. I had come home a little earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Maureen, my wife of 11 years, with her favorite takeout. She always said she loved small surprises, that they were the secret to keeping love alive. But that night, she had a surprise of her own. I walked through the door, balancing the food in one hand while shrugging off my coat, and there she was, standing in the living room, a neatly wrapped box in her hands, tied with a golden ribbon. Her smile was almost nervous, like she was bracing for something. "I have something for you," she said, her voice soft, controlled. I frowned but took the box. "What's the occasion?" She shook her head, her blonde hair bouncing slightly. "Just open it." I sat down on the couch, my heartbeat picking up speed. I wasn't sure why. I had no reason to suspect anything, but something about her energy felt off. I slid the ribbon loose, lifted the lid, and felt my stomach tighten the moment I saw what was inside. Divorce papers. At first, my brain couldn't register it. Maybe it was a joke, some weird prank she had planned to make me panic before laughing it off. But when I looked up at her, she wasn't laughing. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. "There's more," she said, nodding toward the box. I reached inside and pulled out a small envelope. My hands felt foreign to me, almost like they belonged to someone else. I slid my finger under the flap, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and read the first few lines. It was a plane ticket. One way. My chest tightened. "Maureen, what is this?" She exhaled, slow and measured, as if she had rehearsed this conversation 100 times. "I'm leaving, Barton. Tonight." My mouth felt dry. "Leaving where?" She looked me straight in the eye, and then, in the most casual, matter-of-fact voice I had ever heard her use, she said, "To be with Tobias." I blinked. My brain couldn't keep up. Who the hell is Tobias? The silence that followed was unbearable. She looked down at her hands, and when she finally spoke, her voice was almost bored. "You don't know him, but I've been seeing him for about a year." I tried to fight it, but I'm in love with him. The room tilted. The walls felt too close. I heard my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "A year." My voice came out hoarse. "You've been—" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You've been cheating on me for a year?" She sighed, as if this conversation was exhausting for her. "I wanted to tell you sooner, Barton, but I knew how you'd react. You'd try to fix things, and honestly, I don't want to fix this. I want to move on." I couldn't speak. My mind flashed back to a year's worth of memories. Every late-night text she claimed was from a friend, every sudden work event, every moment she had looked me in the eyes and lied straight to my face. And then, as if to drive the final nail into my heart, she said something that made my stomach turn. "I hope we can stay friends." Friends. Friends. I stared at her, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. That was the moment I realized something. She had made her decision. She had prepared for this moment, planned it carefully, packed her bags, and printed a damn plane ticket. This wasn't a mistake, a lapse in judgment. This was who she was now, and I was nothing more than a footnote in her story. I could have begged. I could have screamed. I could have asked why, 100 times. Instead, I did something I never thought I would do. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "If you're leaving," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "then go." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Maybe she had expected a different reaction. Maybe, in some twisted way, she wanted me to fight for her, to plead, to tell her not to go. But I didn't. She hesitated for only a moment, then picked up her bag and walked past me. No final words, no lingering glances. Just the sound of her footsteps fading into the night. And just like that, the woman I had built a life with was gone. That was the last time I saw Maureen as my wife. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. But this story was far from over. Because sometimes, walking away is the easy part. It's what comes after that truly breaks you. The moment Maureen walked out that door, time didn't just slow down, it completely shattered. I stood there, gripping the door handle, listening to her footsteps fade into the night, waiting for the sound of her car pulling away. It never came. Instead, she walked down the street, her silhouette dissolving into the dim glow of the streetlights, just another figure disappearing into the distance. I didn't chase after her. I didn't even close the door right away. I just stood there, staring into the emptiness she had left behind. My whole body felt numb, like I had just walked out of surgery, except no one had given me anesthesia. It was pure, raw exposure to pain, a wound torn open without any warning. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally stepped back inside, closing the door behind me with a dull click. The house was too quiet. It was strange how silence could feel so heavy, so suffocating. Just hours ago, this place had felt warm, familiar, a home. Now, it was nothing more than walls and furniture, a hollow shell of a life I had thought was unshakable. My eyes drifted to the coffee table where I had left the takeout I had brought home for her. Her favorite. Chicken pad thai from that small Thai place down the street, the one we used to go to every Friday when we were first married. The smell still lingered in the air, but now it was just an insult, a cruel joke. I picked up one of the containers, felt the warmth of it in my hands, and then, before I even realized what I was doing, I threw it across the room. The container hit the wall with a dull smack, noodles and sauce splattering onto the floor, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe I would feel something. Maybe the anger would be a relief. Maybe breaking something would drown out the crushing emptiness in my chest. It didn't. I sank onto the couch, elbows on my knees, staring at my hands like they belonged to someone else. My wedding ring was still there, glinting under the dim light. I should take it off, I thought. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. A notification buzzed on my phone, breaking the silence. I pulled it out of my pocket, half expecting a message from Maureen, some kind of explanation, a second thought, something. But it wasn't her. It was a message from my bank. A withdrawal. A large one. My stomach twisted. I opened my banking app, and as the numbers loaded on the screen, my breath caught in my throat. She had taken money. A lot of it. Thousands. Gone. I scrolled through the transactions, my hands shaking, my pulse pounding in my ears. She had drained one of our savings accounts. Not all of it, just enough to leave me in a financial chokehold, but not enough to look like outright theft. Had she planned this too? I thought back to the divorce papers in that damn box, the plane ticket. Of course she had planned this. She had been laying the groundwork for months, possibly longer. And I had been too blind to see it. Too trusting. Too convinced that what we had was real, that she loved me. I clenched my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My first instinct was to call her, demand answers, scream, rage. But I didn't. What would it change? She had already decided. She had made her choice long before tonight. I don't know how long I sat there, my mind racing in circles, before exhaustion finally hit me like a freight train. I dragged myself upstairs, stepping into a bedroom that suddenly felt foreign. Her side of the closet was half empty. Some of her clothes were gone, but not all of them. A few dresses still hung on their hangers, a pair of her shoes were still by the door. She hadn't taken everything. Was that intentional? Did she leave them behind to soften the blow? Or did she just not care enough to finish the job? I fell onto the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts kept looping back to the same question. Why wasn't I enough? I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I drifted in and out, caught between exhaustion and the suffocating weight of reality. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her voice. I want to move on. I hope we can stay friends. Friends. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that barely made it past my lips. Was she serious? Did she really expect me to just accept this, shake her lover's hand, and wish them well? Morning came too soon. The sun rose, spilling light through the blinds, indifferent to the destruction of my life. I rolled out of bed, my body aching, my mind still foggy from the lack of sleep. And then my phone buzzed again. I picked it up, expecting another bank notification, but this time, it was a message. From Maureen. 2 words. I'm sorry. That was it. No explanation. No details. Just those 2 words, like they were supposed to fix anything. I stared at the message, feeling a slow burn rise in my chest. She wasn't sorry. If she was, she wouldn't have done this. If she was, she wouldn't have taken my money and walked out of my life like I was a temporary chapter in her story. I took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the screen. I could respond. I could ask all the questions that were screaming in my head. I could demand to know how long she had been lying to me, why she had done this, if Tobias was really worth it. But instead, I did something I never thought I would do. I deleted the message. And for the first time since she left, I realized something. I wasn't the one who lost everything. She was. And she didn't even know it yet. The moment I deleted Maureen's message, something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief. It wasn't even anger. It was just emptiness. A deep, Hollow space where all my emotions used to be. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the blank screen like it could somehow give me answers. But there were none. Only silence. I forced myself to move, to do something, anything, to pull myself out of this trance. The house felt like a ghost town. Every room a painful reminder of what had been stolen from me. Our wedding photo still sat on the mantel, mocking me with its frozen moment of happiness. My stomach twisted as I looked at it, as if I were staring at a stranger's life instead of my own. I grabbed the frame and shoved it into a drawer. Out of sight, out of mind. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I needed air. I threw on a jacket and stepped outside. The morning was crisp, the sun rising lazily over the neighborhood. Everything looked normal. A woman jogged past with her dog, waving as she always did. Kids rode their bikes down the street, laughing. Somewhere, someone was mowing their lawn. The world hadn't stopped just because mine had. I started walking, my feet moving on autopilot. I wasn't sure where I was going until I found myself standing outside Warren's house. He was my closest friend, the one person I knew would tell me the truth whether I wanted to hear it or not. I knocked twice before stepping back, shoving my hands into my pockets. The door swung open, and there he was, messy hair, a coffee mug in hand, still in his pajamas. He frowned when he saw me. "Barton? You look like hell." I let out a dry laugh. "Feel like it too." He stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled like fresh coffee and bacon, and for a second, I felt like I had stepped into an alternate reality. A place where marriages didn't fall apart overnight. "Tell me everything," he said, sliding a cup of coffee across the table toward me. So I did. I told him about the divorce papers, the plane ticket, Tobias, the money she took. Every detail, every moment. He listened, his expression unreadable, occasionally shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. When I finished, he leaned back, rubbing his face. "Jesus, Barton." I let out a breath, rubbing my temples. "Yeah, she planned this," he said flatly. "Every part of it. She knew exactly what she was doing." I nodded. "I know. What are you going to do?" I shook my head. "I have no idea. She left. Took what she wanted. What else is there?" Warren was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "Do you want the truth?" I looked at him. "Always. She's going to regret this." I scoffed. "Doubt it." "No. Listen to me," he said, his voice firm. "Women like Maureen, they think they're moving on to something better. But it never works out the way they imagine. She's running on fantasy right now. But reality? That's going to hit her like a brick wall." I stared at him, his words sinking in. Could he be right? Could she really regret this? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Another message. But not from Maureen. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but you need to hear this. Call me. It's about Maureen." I read it twice, my pulse picking up speed. Warren leaned over, reading it over my shoulder. "What the hell?" I hesitated for half a second before hitting the call button. The line rang twice before a man's voice answered. "Barton." "Yes." "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "My name is Glenn. I know your wife. And I know about Tobias." My grip on the phone tightened. "What are you talking about?" Another pause, then a slow exhale. "Maureen lied to you. She's been lying about everything." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" Glenn hesitated, as if choosing his next words carefully. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Tobias isn't who she says he is. And if you think she's done hurting you, you're wrong." My stomach twisted. I glanced at Warren, who was watching me with narrowed eyes. I swallowed hard. "Tell me everything." And just like that, everything I thought I knew was about to be shattered all over again. Glenn's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something sharp, urgent. I didn't know this man, but the way he spoke, the way he held on to each word before releasing it, made my stomach twist. This wasn't some prank or a wrong number. He knew something, and whatever it was about to change everything I thought I understood. I tightened my grip on the phone, my knuckles whitening. "What do you mean she's lying? Who the hell are you?" A sigh crackled through the line. He hesitated, then exhaled. "I was Tobias's friend." "Was." "Not anymore. Not after what I found out." I exchanged a glance with Warren, who was now sitting forward, watching me like I was defusing a bomb. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Go on." "Listen," Glenn said. "Tobias isn't just some guy she fell for. He's been doing this for years. Finding women like Maureen. Promising them everything. Making them believe he's their fresh start." A pause. "And then he drains them dry." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's a scammer, Barton." Glenn's voice was grim. Not just a con artist, but a manipulator. He picks women in marriages that are strained, but not broken. He makes them believe they're unhappy. Then he feeds them a dream, romance, escape, a better life. But once they leave their husbands for him, he scoffed. He takes everything. Not just their money, their credit, their assets. He runs up their debt, drains their accounts, and when there's nothing left, he disappears. Just like that. I felt my stomach drop. My grip on the phone tightened. You're telling me Maureen left me for a scammer? Yes. His voice was firm. And she doesn't even know it yet. I swallowed hard, my mind racing through every interaction, every moment that suddenly took on a new, sinister light. Maureen had seemed so certain about Tobias. So sure that leaving me was the right choice. But if Glenn was telling the truth, she wasn't running toward a fairy tale. She was walking straight into a nightmare. My breath came shallow. How do you know all this? Because I've seen it before, Glenn said. Tobias did the same thing to my sister. A silence stretched between us. She thought she was leaving her dead-end marriage for something better, he continued. A year later, she was bankrupt, homeless, and he was gone. His voice wavered, just slightly. She took her own life, Barton. She couldn't handle the shame, the loss. And Tobias? He just moved on to the next woman, like she never existed. The weight of his words settled deep in my chest. This wasn't just some cautionary tale. This was real. And Maureen was next. I felt my jaw clench. So why are you telling me this? A bitter laugh. Because I don't want to see it happen again. And because she won't believe me if I tell her. I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning. Maureen had already thrown everything away, our marriage, our history, my trust. And now, the man she thought was her future was just a parasite, waiting to drain her dry. And the worst part? I knew she wouldn't believe it. I exhaled slowly. What do you want me to do? Glenn hesitated. That's up to you. But if you care, if even a small part of you still cares about what happens to her, you might want to find a way to warn her before it's too late. I ended the call and set my phone down, rubbing my temples. Warren let out a low whistle. That's a hell of a twist. I scoffed. No kidding. So, what's the plan? He leaned forward. You gonna tell her? I let out a breath. She won't listen. Warren smirked. Well, maybe not to you. I narrowed my eyes. What does that mean? His smirk widened. It means, Barton, that if she won't believe you, maybe we need to find someone she will believe. And just like that, an idea began to form. I wasn't going to beg Maureen to come back. I wasn't going to try to win her back from Tobias. But I was going to make damn sure that when reality came crashing down, she knew exactly what she had thrown away. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one left broken. The weight of Glenn's words settled into my chest like a stone. Tobias was a fraud, a manipulator, a parasite feeding on women like Maureen, women who were looking for something more, something they thought they were missing. And just like that, I saw my wife not as the woman who had betrayed me, not as the one who had torn my life apart, but as someone walking straight toward disaster without even realizing it. And the worst part? There was no way in hell she'd believe me if I told her. I could already hear her response. You're just bitter, Barton. You're jealous. You can't stand that I've moved on. No. If I wanted to get through to her, I had to be smarter than that. Warren tapped his fingers against the table, watching me. All right, he said. You know she's in trouble. You know she won't listen to you. So what's the play? I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. We need proof. He raised an eyebrow. Of what? That Tobias is a scumbag? That won't be enough. Even if we get a picture of him robbing a bank, Maureen will still find a way to convince herself he's the victim. I gritted my teeth because he was right. She wasn't thinking rationally, she was thinking like someone who had already invested in a dream. And people will do anything to protect a dream, even if it's crumbling right in front of them. I needed something she couldn't ignore. Something so undeniable that it shattered the illusion before it was too late. I picked up my phone again and dialed Glenn. He answered on the second ring. That was fast, he said. I need everything you have on Tobias, I told him. Everything. A pause. Then a knowing chuckle. You're planning something. Just send it to me. Another pause. Then he said, give me an hour. I hung up and ran a hand through my hair. Warren watched me with an amused glint in his eyes. You're enjoying this. I'm pissed, I corrected. He smirked. Same thing. Maybe it was. Maybe a small part of me was enjoying the idea of watching Maureen's little fantasy world burn to the ground. But more than that, I just didn't want to be the idiot left behind, the guy everyone pitted because his wife had traded him in for a liar. No. If she was going to crash, she was damn well going to see what she had done before she hit the ground. And I was going to be the one holding up the mirror. The information dropped. An hour later, Glenn came through. My email pinged with a flood of files. I opened the first one, and immediately, my stomach turned. Tobias had been married before. 3 times. Each woman followed the same pattern. Happy social media posts, glowing praise about their wonderful new love, and then radio silence. Financial records showed massive debt piled up, accounts drained, houses sold off. And Tobias? He disappeared every single time. One woman had even gone to the police, but the case had gone nowhere. Tobias knew how to cover his tracks, how to operate just inside the lines of legality. He wasn't just a con man, he was an artist at it. And now he had Maureen. I scrolled through the files, my pulse tightening. There were messages, conversations Tobias had had with other women while he was with Maureen. He was already lining up his next target. My blood ran cold. She had no idea. Warren whistled lowly. Wow, she really picked a winner. I clenched my jaw. She's not seeing this because she doesn't want to see it. Then let's make sure she has to. The plan. We spent the next few hours setting everything up. The information needed to be presented in a way that wasn't coming from me. If I showed her, she'd assume I had fabricated it, twisted the facts to make her doubt Tobias. No, I needed to get to her through someone else. So I reached out to someone she did trust. Her sister. Eliza and I had never been particularly close, but she had always been the more level-headed one in the family. And she wasn't an idiot. She had never liked Tobias. When Maureen first started seeing him, Eliza had told her to slow down, to think. But Maureen hadn't listened. I called her. She answered on the second ring. Barton. Her voice was cautious. I need your help. Silence. Then, with what? I took a deep breath and explained everything, Tobias's history, the women before Maureen, the financial ruin he left in his wake. I told her about Glenn, about the messages, about how Tobias was already working on finding someone new while still stringing Maureen along. When I finished, there was nothing but silence. Eliza. Then she let out a slow, furious breath. That bastard. I exhaled. So you believe me? I knew something was off about him, she muttered. I told her, but she wouldn't listen. She still won't. Not from me. I hesitated. But she might from you. Eliza was silent for a long time. Then she said, send me everything. The breaking point. I sent her the files. And then I waited. Hours passed with no response. Then a day. Then 2. I started to think maybe I had miscalculated, that maybe even Eliza couldn't get through to her. Maybe Maureen was too far gone. Then, on the 3rd day, my phone rang. It was Eliza. And she was furious. She won't admit it, she snapped. But she's shaken. I showed her everything, Barton. I laid it all out. At first, she called me a liar. Then she tried to say it was all in the past. But I could see it, she's scared. She's starting to doubt him. A cold satisfaction settled in my chest. She wasn't fully there yet. But the cracks were forming. She's not leaving him yet, Eliza continued, but she is asking questions. And Tobias. She let out a sharp laugh. He's getting nervous. He knows something's up. I clenched my jaw. Good. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Maureen still had a choice to make. And I had a feeling she was about to realize she had made the wrong one. I didn't expect Maureen to change overnight. No one wakes up one day and admits they've made the worst mistake of their life, not when they've spent months convincing themselves they were right. But doubt? That was different. Doubt was like a small fracture in a windshield. It starts barely noticeable, a thin crack that seems harmless. But with enough pressure, it spreads, splinters, grows until the whole thing shatters. And now, that crack had formed. Eliza's message was proof of that. She's shaken, she had said. I don't think she's sleeping. She's been asking Tobias about his past, and he's getting defensive. Good. Because now, it was only a matter of time. I kept my distance over the next few days. No calls. No texts. No reaching out. If Maureen was going to realize the truth, she had to come to it herself. If I pushed, she'd dig in deeper. But if I let her sit with the doubt, let it fester in the back of her mind, Tobias would do the rest of the work for me. And sure enough, he did. 3 days after my conversation with Eliza, I got another call. But this time, it wasn't from her. It was from Maureen. I stared at the screen as her name flashed across it. For a split second, I considered ignoring it, letting her feel the silence she had left behind. But curiosity won out. I hit accept. Her voice came through the line, quiet. almost hesitant. Barton. I didn't say anything at first. Just let the silence stretch, waiting for her to talk. She sighed. I don't know why I called. I kept my voice even. Then why did you? A pause. Then, do you believe people can change? That threw me. I frowned. What? She exhaled, and I could hear the strain in her voice. I know you don't owe me anything, but... Tobias isn't the man you think he is. A cold, sharp laugh left my lips before I could stop it. You mean the man with 3 ex-wives? The one who drains women's bank accounts and disappears? That Tobias. She inhaled sharply. That's not who he is now. People have pasts, Barton. You, of all people, should know that. I clenched my jaw. And did he tell you that? That he's changed? She hesitated. Yes. Of course, he did. I shook my head. Maureen, let me ask you something. If none of this was true, if he really was a good guy, why did he get so defensive when you started asking questions? Silence. You did ask him, didn't you? More silence. I sighed. Look, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you. You already know something isn't right. That's why you called. I don't know what I think, she muttered. That was a lie. She did know. She just wasn't ready to admit it yet. But I wasn't going to fight her on it. All right, I said simply. Let me know when you figure it out. And then I hung up. She had made her choice when she walked out that door. But now, for the first time, she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. The beginning of the end. The next few days passed without another word from Maureen. But that didn't mean nothing was happening. Eliza kept me updated. She's spiraling, she told me over the phone. She's been watching him now, not just believing everything he says. She saw him take a call last night and walk out of the room. Wouldn't tell her who it was. I leaned against my desk, staring out the window. She's catching on. She's trying to, but he's still got his hooks in her. I ran a hand through my hair. It won't last. Not if she's questioning him. Eliza hesitated. I don't think it's going to be that easy. What do you mean? She sighed. She told me she doesn't want to come back to you just to say she failed. She's more afraid of looking stupid than she is of actually getting hurt. That hit like a punch to the gut. Because I understood it. Pride. Pride would keep her standing in a burning house just to prove to everyone she meant to be there. And Tobias? He knew that. He was counting on it. But pride couldn't protect her forever. And I had a feeling that soon, it wouldn't be me she'd be calling. It would be him. Because when people like Tobias realize they're losing control, they don't just walk away. They hold on tighter. And when that happened, Maureen was going to have to decide just how far she was willing to fall. I didn't hear from Maureen for days after that call. And honestly, I was fine with it. I had wasted enough time, enough energy trying to piece together the wreckage of something she had burned to the ground. She had made her decision. Now, she was the one who had to live with it. But that didn't mean I wasn't paying attention. Eliza kept me updated, feeding me bits and pieces of what was going on behind the scenes. At first, Maureen was still holding on, clinging to the fantasy she had built. But little by little, the cracks were spreading. And then, everything changed. It was a Friday night when Eliza called me. I had just poured myself a drink, settling into the quiet of my empty house when my phone buzzed. I considered ignoring it, until I saw her name. I answered on the second ring. What's up? Her voice was low, urgent. It's happening. I sat up. What's happening? She let out a breath. Tobias slipped up. My grip tightened around the phone. Tell me everything. I could hear noise in the background, a low hum of conversation, music playing somewhere distant. Then Eliza spoke, her words fast and sharp. They're at a party. Some fancy event he dragged her to. And Barton? He's not even pretending to be subtle anymore. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? I mean, she said, he's already moved on. Right in front of her. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I had known it was coming. It was only a matter of time before Tobias got bored, before he started sniffing around for his next victim. But hearing it, knowing Maureen was standing there, watching it happen in real-time was something else entirely. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Eliza, I said, rubbing my temple. What does she expect me to do about it? She's not calling you, she admitted. Not yet. But she will. I know she will. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. What do you want me to say if she does? Silence. Then, softer, what do you want to say? I didn't answer. Because I honestly didn't know. The fallout. Hours passed, but I barely moved. I just sat there, my drink untouched, my mind caught in an endless loop. I thought about all the times I had tried to warn her. How she had looked at me like I was the problem, like I was the one trying to trap her instead of the man standing beside her now, already preparing to discard her like she meant nothing. I thought about the life we had built together, the years we had spent growing, the quiet moments that no one else had seen, and how, in the end, none of it had mattered to her. Then, just past midnight, my phone rang again. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Maureen's voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. Barton. I closed my eyes. Yeah, a beat of silence. Then, I think I made a mistake. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I had seen this moment coming from a mile away. You think? I repeated. She exhaled sharply. Don't do that. Do what? Make this harder than it already is. My jaw tightened. You made it hard, Maureen. You did this. Not me. She didn't respond right away. When she finally did, her voice was thick, uneven. He was with someone else. Of course he was. I thought. Her breath hitched. I thought we were different. I pinched the bridge of my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. You thought you were special. That's what he wanted you to think. She let out a broken laugh. You sound just like Eliza. Maybe because she actually cares about you. Silence. And then, the words I had been waiting for. Can I come home? I let those 4 words hang in the air between us. Could she? Should she? I could already imagine it. The way she would walk back through that door, looking at me with those eyes that used to melt me. The way she would try to fit herself back into the life she had abandoned like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. And I wasn't the same man she had left behind. I took a slow breath. No, Maureen. You can't. A sharp inhale. Barton. You made your choice. My voice was steady, even. And I made mine. Silence. And then, softly, I don't have anywhere to go. Not my problem. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. That's not my problem, Maureen. And then I hung up. For the first time since she walked out that door, I felt free. I wasn't the fool left waiting. I wasn't the backup plan. I was done. And for once, I was okay with that. Hanging up that call was the single hardest thing I had ever done. Not because I wanted her back. Not because I felt sorry for her. But because, for the first time in over a year, I was truly choosing myself. Maureen had made her bed. She had convinced herself that her fantasy with Tobias was worth throwing everything away. She had turned me into the villain of her story, painting herself as the brave woman chasing her happiness. And now, that illusion was gone. But I wasn't her safety net. I wasn't her backup plan. I had been her husband. And she had treated me like an option. That night, after I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house, letting it all settle. The weight of it. The finality of it. And you know what? It felt good. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning in what-ifs. I wasn't clinging to the past, trying to piece together something that had already shattered beyond repair. I was just here, in the present, with a future that, for once, didn't include chasing after someone who didn't deserve me. A new beginning. The days that followed were different. Lighter. I woke up without that crushing weight on my chest. I went to work and actually focused. I spent time with friends, real friends, people who had been there for me through the worst of it. And then, something unexpected happened. I met Sienna. It wasn't some grand, dramatic moment. There were no fireworks, no cinematic music swelling in the background. It was simple. I was grabbing coffee at a small shop downtown when she bumped into me, spilling half her latte on my shirt. She looked up, horrified, already fumbling for napkins. Oh my God, I am so sorry, she gasped, dabbing at the stain. I swear I'm not usually this clumsy. I laughed, taking the napkins from her hand. It's fine. Gives me an excuse to finally get rid of this shirt. She bit her lip, then smirked. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'll buy you another coffee. And just like that, something shifted. We sat down, talked, laughed, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something real. Not forced. Not built on old wounds or regret. Just easy. Sienna wasn't a rebound. She wasn't a replacement for Maureen. She was proof that life moves on. That happiness isn't something you have to chase. It's something you build. The last goodbye. I never spoke to Maureen again after that last phone call. Eliza told me she struggled for a while. Tobias drained what little she had left before ditching her completely. She tried to rebuild, but it was hard. She had burned too many bridges, cut too many people out. And in the end, she was left with nothing but the realization that she had destroyed her own life. Maybe she learned from it. Maybe she didn't. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had my own life to live. And for the first time, I was really living it.